What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Coffee with Cory. I'm your host, Cory Smith, here to discuss some NC State football recruiting with Michael Clark, football analyst for Pack Power 247. Michael, NC State, pretty active. Obviously, a lot of teams very active over the last week plus now at this point. God, it sounds crazy to think that we're not even 2 weeks into this thing for the transfer portal. A little bit of a dead period here. You got a couple days for the coaches meetings and everybody getting together on the most perfect time of the year for all these teams to get together and do a coaches convention. But just your thoughts. First of all, we'll jump into everything, individual players, but on the haul that NC State has been able to bring in so far and some of the more critical pieces so far.
Yeah, I think to start by just saying, we were talking about this before we started this podcast, not exactly the best timing for a coaches convention. You go through you turn through the transfer portal process, and now you've got you have a 2-day window, 24-hour window to get your last remaining needs per se on campus. It just seems like a lot of wasted time. Again, at some point, we both talked about this. Something has to give. You still got teams playing. Obviously, the national championship is next Monday. Those kids are not, for the majority, going in the portal until that game is over. You give them a 10-day extension or whatever it is. And here you are. It goes all the way into February. A lot of wasted time, very inefficient process. And then the money, on the other hand, seems to be getting more inflated by the cycle. But I think NC State has, done a nice job, a decent job, I would say, in this portal cycle. It's just there's so much that goes into it that the average fan doesn't know about. And everybody right now is learning on the go. So it's hard because there's no regulations or rules in place.
All right. So because of the fact that NC State has added, so many players since we talked last, I think the last time we talked on one of these was last Thursday after NC State added Andre Evans and King Mack, which, by the way, we'll have a video breakdown of King Mack later today. But I wanted to kind of go over, we don't really have a lot of video of Andre Evans, so we're not digging into the high school review there, but hopefully we'll have plenty of video this upcoming season to go over of Andre Evans. But I wanted to go back through all of the guys that NC State has been able to add. It's not necessarily in order or anything along those lines. We're going to go through kind of the most noteworthy ones first, and then we'll continue to go through some of the other guys at the end. But Davion Gause, obviously Gause, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. Hard S at the end there to make sure we get that correct. But Davion Gause from UNC, a big addition for NC State at the running back position. Obviously, the expectation is that you're going to be getting a guy back in Jaden Scott, Duke Scott for NC State. You lose Hollywood Smothers, so you knew you needed another back in the backfield there. But Gaus comes over the weekend on Saturday, commits while he's on his official visit to NC State. Just your thoughts on what NC State is getting there in maybe a backup, but also, a guy that really can compete for minutes there and compete to be in a true rotation with Duke Scott next season.
Yeah, I think the most likely scenario, at least right now, would be Duke Scott being the starter. He comes in, Gaus does, and competes with a guy like Jonathan Paylor, assuming he's rehabbed from injury, although two different types of backs. Mm-hmm. That's kind of, where that sits. He's a physical, more inside, one-cut runner. Really, I wouldn't say a bigger version of Duke Scott because I think Duke runs better, is faster. But, again, an experienced back who's played in the ACC, understands the competition level, understands – what it kind of takes. So you have maybe 3 running backs competing for 2 spots. If you're NC State, it's probably about as good as you could hope for. You were never going to be able to go pick up, or nor did you really need to spend a ton of money at running back because you like what you have in Duke Scott. And then, like I said, Jonathan Paylor was a kid who, after kind of a slow start to his career, really seemed to be turning a corner before he got injured. So should be good enough there. And I think that's the hope.
Yeah, and Gaul's a guy that, over the past 2 seasons at UNC, 60-plus carries in each season, over 300 yards his first season, only 259 this past season, but has averaged over 4.5 yards per carry. Became a little bit better of a pass-catching back this past season, which is why the carries took a little bit of a dip. The running, the rushing yards took a little bit of a dip. He was used more as a pass catching back. 16 catches for 132 yards, actually graded out higher as a receiver than any player on UNC's roster this past season. So you're losing Hollywood Smothers, a guy that was known for that this past year, and you're gaining a guy in Davion Gause that you feel like, all right, has a chance to really take a step in that, in that area and probably be a little bit more of a pass catching back out of the backfield. Also, clearly has a relationship with CJ Bailey. I mean, how important do you think that was in bringing him in and him wanting to be at NC State, playing under CJ Bailey or playing behind CJ Bailey yet again after playing with him for so many years at Chaminade Madonna?
Definitely, I don't think hurt. It's also a pretty easy move for a guy like him. You're talking about moving 20 minutes down the road-ish, give or take. So the logistics there, being a backup running back, your market financially is not going to be, huge within reason. So again, this is a nice value pickup for NC State. And if he can come in and, like I said, compete for that second running back spot and maybe also offer you some value on special teams. I mean, you look around at what could potentially happen, and that to me would be kind of my projection, how he kind of fits in. It's just interesting with all these guys. We talked about it. I mentioned before we started just how transactional this deal is for pretty much all the transfers. It's pretty cut and dry. You get them on campus for the visit. You make them your offer. If they are not in the fold by the time they leave, it's usually harder to get them to commit. Give them your offer and they move on. So again, it's just all this is so much different than the process of prep recruiting. And again, it's about the bottom line, and that's it.
Yeah, and next guy here on the list for NC State, we talked about him a little bit the last time that we did one of these, but because he was coming on a visit, or actually had already taken a visit before he was going to go to a couple other places. But Harvey Dyson out of Tulane, 6'3", 250 pound edge rusher, a big play, guy for NC State, one of the most important targets for them, regardless of position, going into the portal. They identified him early on, brought him in, guy that was all AAC this past year, third team selection, which is surprising to me a little bit. Finished with 11 tackles for loss and the most sacks in the AAC this past season with 8. Also a guy that graded out above a 90.4 when it comes to pass rushing from Pro Football Focus going into this upcoming season. Feels like, he came from Texas Tech initially, was previously teammates with Joseph Adidere from Texas Tech. They rejoined now at NC State, and to me feels like a potentially great tandem this upcoming season. Hopefully Adidere will be fully healthy. We talked a lot about the end of season where he was from a pass rushing standpoint, and how I felt like if he's fully healthy, probably should have been played a little bit more at the end of the season. But just your thoughts on what Dyson brings to NC State, and now knowing that he's actually in the fold for the Wolfpack.
You can make an argument, like I said, and I think I said this in the story, that outside of getting Bailey back, improving the pass rush was pretty high on the priority list for NC State, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Because really, if you can't get to the quarterback and not only pressure him but convert it into sacks, it falls back on your second level at linebacker and your defensive backfield, and they're not going to be able to play to their full potential or be the type of players they probably could be without a better pass rush. So this is a really nice pickup for NC State. You talk about the 8 sacks, 11 for loss. You also, I think, had 24 quarterback pressures. That was an area where NC State at times could pressure but could not, finish with a sack. Well, when it comes to Dyson, this is a guy that pressures and does convert. So you've got a little bit of both, probably a little bit of position versatility. How does it work with him going forward? You hope that he can take another step forward, even though he's really good last year. If you could get similar production, you would be ecstatic in 2026 from what you got in 2025.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add, obviously the fact that you do need him to take a step in the right direction when it comes to stopping the run. Looking back at this past year, his rush defensive grade, not one of the best for Tulane overall. Actually finished with a 53.1 So that's going to be kind of like, in order for him to be a true, every down linebacker, edge, stand-up defensive end, whatever you need from him, he does have to get, progressively better from there, because NC State obviously does want to be able to stop the run.
They have to have him, to be honest with you. There's just not the proven depth or really experience anywhere on the defensive line, if we're being objective. And I think that is an issue. How much can you ask of him? He's probably 240 pounds. Do you bulk him up a little bit in hopes that will help him? You also have to think, Corey, he did this against AAC competition. This is a clear step up. Going to be a lot more physical. The size difference he's going to face on a week in and week out basis. How does that affect him? I'm not saying he can't do it, but he's going to have to show that he can play the run, because, again, NC State has a lot of questions up front on the defensive line, and I know we're going to get to that.
Yeah, and he played at the jack position for them, so it'll be very similar coming over to NC State, kind of asked to do, play the Kean Sloan role that NC State had this past season. All right, so as far as other players, another big one for NC State, high upside type player. You have to add a couple of those in the offseason as well. You can't just go out and, add guys that were highly productive, because not every single guy that you want or every single guy that you're going to go out and get is going to be highly productive at his previous stop. But Chance Robinson, another, former 7-on-7 teammate with CJ Bailey at the wide receiver position, but somebody that, when you look at his upside, guy that was a 4-star coming out of high school, top 247 player, I believe was 153rd in the country or somewhere around there, coming into, out of his high school career down in Florida. But somebody that, NC State, you have to replenish what you had. And, when it comes to the wide receiver position, so far they've gotten a speedster out of Buffalo. We'll talk about, Tyran Warren here in just a second too. But Chance Robinson, what do you see as far as the upside, and what do you feel like, his potential is here for NC State too?
Well, I think you're just kind of hoping his athletic profile from high school when he was a 4-star recruit, that kind of translates when he gets to Raleigh. Like, he's able to kind of take a step forward and make that type of impact. I think the big thing with him was just health. Couldn't really stay healthy at Miami. And Miami, we've seen them make this postseason run. I mean, they're so talented across the board. Like, if you're hurt down there, you're quickly going to fall down the depth chart. They have so much talent on the offensive and defensive lines, but also out wide. I mean, there are guys who can really play. So, again, it's almost like with some of these kids, if say he's healthy there, it probably factors somewhat into the wide receiver rotation. It's almost like a reset in his career. We've battled injuries. Let's get a fresh start. We'll go to NC State where there's clearly opportunity. Now it just comes to, can you take advantage of it? Can you separate yourself and become, a presence of the outside receiver that they really need? Somebody is going to have to step up. You lost your top 4 pass catchers from last year, whether it was to the transfer portal, graduation, however you want to word it. So there are questions there. You do have some talent in the room. Now, can he take a major step forward? It's the question.
Knew this was going to happen. Daniel Cruz is now committed to NC State. I'm going to be pushing that out here in just a second, but while I'm pushing it out, I wanted to throw it back to you to talk a little bit about another big addition for NC State. Tyran Warren, guy from Alcorn State down in Mississippi, a guy that, look, again, another high upside. You need some guys, but he kind of fits that speed profile again, has a little more size than what you're getting from length. A little more length as well. So, I mean, just your thoughts on what you're getting in him as well.
Well, I think you're getting a guy who can really run. And talk about the length, 6'3", 185. I think the question, again, for him is transitioning from Alcorn State to the ACC. That's quite a step up. Strength and conditioning is going to be really important for him. You can run by people at the level he was playing at, but it's going to become harder. The question I have, can he add muscle? Can he add, strength in the next 6, 7, 8 months to really prepare him to be an impactful guy? Because it's clear State, needs help on the outside. And this is his last year of eligibility. So how much it remains to be seen what type of role he'll have. But I think you're hopeful that, he kind of continues his ascension, shows improvement, Again, talked to him this morning. We'll have a story soon. This is a guy that's really excited about the opportunity. Alex Falk was the kind of the ringleader with Mississippi connections because that's where he's from. And again, a upside guy. Played for a really bad offense at Alcorn State. I mean, they just really couldn't do much. And I would classify him kind of as a bright spot there. So putting him with a more than competent quarterback, maybe you can get more out of him. If nothing else, it makes your receiver room a little older, as does adding a guy like Chance Robinson. These are third and fourth year guys, because behind them, after all the attrition, for whatever reason, you were going to be relying on possibly some true freshmen to play. And I still think a guy like Tyree Copper, per se, is he still a factor in that rotation, because his upside is clearly going to be higher than probably any of these guys. Yes, he probably is, and could Amir Yacker or somebody else step up, but it'll be interesting to see. I think State still needs a receiver. Obviously probably in the market are going to be able to afford a true one. But you're just going to have to, like a lot of programs across the country, kind of mold this group, and maybe it's more of a attack by numbers, and you have 3, 4, 5 guys who can consistently make plays. Maybe that's what you're looking at next year.
Yeah, and another big addition for NC State too out of the portal. Look, I mean, not every position is going to be as highly talked about as some, but NC State really needed a punter. We didn't talk about him the last time around. Jackson Waller comes over for NC State from Arkansas State, a guy that had a lot of punts this past season for them. Just your thoughts on what his addition means, especially after you lose a guy like Caden Boomkester, who's been around for so long. Noonkester, I still call it Noonkester.
Not going to pretend to be this special team savant or whatever, but I would defer in this situation to a guy like Todd Goebel, who's widely considered one of the better special teams coaches in the country. If this is a guy that he's zoned in on, that pretty much is good enough for me. I think NC State's track record with punters is obviously attractive. Probably hopes he does not have to punt as much as he did this past season. If he does, State is in trouble. So again, I think it goes back to experience. If you're going to bring somebody in on special teams, whether it's a kicker, punter, long snapper, it's key to kind of know what you're getting. Have an idea of, okay, we can depend on this guy. We know he's been in tough spots. We know he's been asked to shoulder a heavy workload, because there are games where you really have to rely on the punter. Really good at pinning guys inside the 20. That will be big for NC State, especially with all the defensive questions they're going to have going into next season. A lot of young guys and a lot of important spots. So the punter could carry a lot of weight in 2026.
And kind of continuing on the list here too. I mean, Hunter Provience that comes over from why am I blanking here?
Montana State.
From Montana State. I started to say Utah State, and I was like, that's not correct. I know that's not. Guy that was a FCS champion this past year with Montana State. Kind of feels, you're still looking for that move tight end to maybe add there. Maybe they feel like they have it on the roster. We'll see in either Preston Douglas or somebody like Gus Ritchie that could step up this upcoming year. But you really needed to go out and kind of fill that Cody Hardy role. It feels like Hunter Provience is kind of that guy, right?
Yeah, I think at this point you're just kind of, maybe he's and not saying upside guy, but a guy that you think that there's a lot of meat on the bone left to develop. He needs to get stronger. I think that's the biggest thing for most of these guys, like we've hinted around, coming from whether it's the FCS level, Division II, Division III, the physicality, the strength, the size is just completely different, and the speed of the game. So there's going to be an adjustment period there. I believe he's got 2 years of eligibility. I'm trying to look. How much can, from a strength standpoint, how much stronger can he get? And this, it's just pretty general. What does he look like in spring ball? I think, nobody really knows truly how these guys are going to fit or where they are in their career progression until you see them on the field. And we should you have a pretty good idea quickly of how much can he contribute. Again, I'm not saying he's a year away, but it may take him a little time. I think he does need to get a little bit stronger. Tight end room is lengthy numbers wise at this point. Yeah. So
but not an experience. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you throw him in there and say, okay, who ends up emerging? I mean, there's all over State's roster. You're going to have, I think, position battles and to be determined. I mean, some of these portal guys are projected starters, but at the same time, there's no guarantees right now. And a guy like him comes in, competes, and you say, hey, look, man, you've got the opportunity, and that's all we can offer you. And I think playing at a higher level is appealing to a lot of the kids, the FCS and Division II, Division III, however you want, and even the group of 4 or 5, whatever it is now.
Exactly.
I can't even keep up.
I know. I think it's still group of 5, maybe group of 6 now. If you want to include the Pac-2 morphing into the Mountain.
It was group of 6 until the ACC sent a team to the national championship, right?
There you go.
It's so bad.
Well, all right. So since we know now, because we had kind of, I wanted to talk a little bit about his visit and things along those lines, but now we can actually go ahead and say Daniel Cruz committed to NC State. From Texas, interior offensive lineman, a major need for NC State. You talked about Jamarian McCrimmon earlier in the podcast, but obviously you needed another guard to be able to fill out that room. NC State, look, you have guys like Rico Jackson coming back. You like what you got in Kamen Smith. He needs to continue to progress. But with you moving Spike Souls over to the center position, they needed another guard here. You get a guy in Daniel Cruz that has played that position, 6'3", 312 pounds. Former near 4-star recruit for Texas. They got a couple of years ago. What are your thoughts on Cruz and how big of an addition is that for NC State as well?
Well, kind of spot duty at Texas, and that doesn't necessarily reflect him as a player because the talent level there is just so high. Yeah. Prep All-American, a guy that I kind of picture as a guard, considering NC State's need there, which is significant. Again, you say you come in and compete. I don't think NC State's promising any of these guys anything. You can't do that at this point. You hope. I think the hope would be, and I think how you feel, is that this guy ultimately ascends to become a starter, because I would be lying if I was not concerned about the guard position. That was something that you really needed to address going into the portal. And I think this is not just limited to NC State. The market for bodies up front, whether it's on the defensive line or offensive line, it's so expensive. And if you're trying to get an all-conference level type of player up front, you're looking at probably down the stretch, even a guard, maybe high 6 figures, which is kind of hard to fathom. But the longer this goes, what happens, Cory? Obviously, the portal gets picked over, but bidding wars come into play. And you are swimming in waters with maybe a top 10, 15 program that is desperate. Believe it or not, they've missed on guys too. But they're not going to miss but so much because of the unlimited resources. And that's where what I'm saying is maybe they would consider Daniel Cruz a reach coming from Texas. Well, maybe not all of a sudden. So you were able to kind of hold off SMU. They did visit there. That was worrisome, at least from a common sense standpoint, because he's from Texas. I don't know if they filled up or whatever, or we need to say, who knows? You probably never know the truth. But again, an semi-older guy, I think this will be year 3 for him. Can he handle a heavier workload is the case, because I think NC State's got to really figure something out at guard. Rico Jackson's a promising kid, but everything I hear suggests they're more comfortable playing in a tackle. It makes sense because NC State has had no tackle depth for 5 years, give or take. I can't remember the last time they had a real third offensive tackle that they were really confident in. I think Rico, considering what he showed this year with another offseason, fits in there. But I think we'd be naive to think, Cory, that he's not going to have to probably get a look at guard, because they've got to shore that up. I mean, if not, you're going to be staring in a similar season than you were last year. Yeah,
I mean, and again, his profile fits a little bit better for a guard, but at the same time, Rico Jackson, a guy that 6'6", so he does have a little bit of that offensive tackle in him, but he's a little bit better of a run blocker than he has been a pass blocker in recent years when he's got on the field. So we'll see where that fit is. Last thing for you
too, before you go on, I think is that NC State's approach at this point kind of has to be almost positionless. You have to just say, okay, who are our best five? And that's the guys that are going to play. You've got tackles pretty much situated with Teague Anderson and Jameer McCrinnon. I mean, those are two guys I think you feel comfortable. Obviously, Spike at center figures to be one of the better centers probably in the country next year. But guard, I mean, you're going to have a lot of bodies competing. And in one way, that's good because it's going to, like I said, create competition. In another way, it's an unknown, and you're going to have probably one of the better quarterbacks in college football, and you just got to protect him, and you got to be able to get a better push in the run game. It's crazy when you watch these playoffs just how good some of these teams are up front.
Yes, sir. Last thing here, actually, Nick did ask. He said Keenan and Teddy planning on sticking around, being Keenan Jackson and Teddy Hoffman. Yes, everything I've heard so far suggests that they're still going to be there. Have you heard anything different?
I think you need to look at the timeline here. If you were to enter the portal now, you would put yourself in a really bad position because, I mean, obviously certain things can't be avoided. If there's a coaching change, something happens, I get it. There's all types of situations. But, with it being dead until the 15th and the portal, guys visiting the 15th and 16th, then this thing's done. So you're really limiting your market. I think given the youth of those two guys this past season, Keenan's a guy that played a lot as a true freshman, played this past year. And then Teddy, I'm not saying you don't have a huge market, but I think you have to handle this thing smart because I just look around, and I don't know how you feel, Cory. When you start transferring multiple times, unless you're like a guy that's commanding seven figures each time, it feels like you're kind of on a hamster wheel. You're just always chasing something unless you transfer down a level. And I think that's something guys have to have some self-awareness about. Maybe I would have a better shot doing that. These two guys, I think, are critical parts of NC State's receiver rotation next year. They have to be. You, again, can't promise them anything, but I think both will see an uptick in targets. They've been in the program, Hoffman's second year, Jackson's third year. With everything that you lost, I mean, it's a pretty good situation for those two.
All right, last thing really quickly before we head out of here, because this has run a little bit long. Obviously, I was trying to do everything else behind the scenes, and I still have to send out a text alert. I apologize, guys. I haven't sent that out yet, but last
you
thing
are forgiven.
Yeah, I know. Maybe. We'll see. Maybe from you, but not everybody. Last thing for you here, positions of need still remaining for NC State. I would still say you probably still need a couple of the guys that you've already added. I mean, I would still like for them to add another, linebacker or stand-up defensive end, something along those lines. But just your thoughts on where the needs still are for NC State, because you do have just a few more days of guys potentially entering the transfer portal and trying to host them over the next several days after you get done with this short dead period here too.
Well, I feel like the start on offense feels like receiver. You still could stand to add another body, a bigger guy on the outside, or maybe you just take the best available. The only problem is, again, the portal is severely picked over. Could there potentially be a receiver or two you target after the national championship? Those two teams will have guys enter the portal. They will have a 10-day window. Maybe you can maneuver and potentially pick up. Another thing to keep in mind, Cory, is 20th is the last day, give or take. Guys are supposed to be on campus to be eligible. I guess there's some rules there. But I would think, again, linebacker feels like an obvious one. I mean, wide receiver feels like obvious. Go to defense. Linebacker, feels like another obvious one. A little surprised they haven't added one yet. You're going to probably bring in a couple towards the end of the week. I have some names for our subscribers here shortly. But if I had to say, defensive line is a massive concern for me. I think with us, we always are going to tell you, try to be honest. You just don't have a lot coming back, a lot of proven guys, and it's concerning. I thought, and it's not NC State's fault. The market is kind of what it is right now. 7 figures for a quality, really upper-tier defensive lineman, and you get in pissing contests when you swim in those waters. I mean, you're swimming with a lot of the higher-level guys. They already have in their mind schools that they're interested in, and those schools are more than happy to oblige with a visit and a hefty payday. So what I'm saying, does this come down to maybe possibly looking at a junior college level? I think that might be more realistic for NC State. You could potentially add a depth piece at linebacker, defensive line, but I don't know if you're going to be able to get the type of player you really need. So A lot of guys are going to have to step up. Potentially, do you add another safety? I think they could use help at corner as well. I mean, really everywhere on defense. I don't know. The edge rusher was a big thing, and obviously a guy like King Mack. But I don't know how you feel. It feels like you could still do some work at all three levels.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, I will say this, there are some young pieces, and we've talked about it, along the defensive line that I really like. Chase Bond being one of them, I thought played really well this past season, was a pleasant surprise. A guy that was not heavily recruited coming out of high school. NC State took him, and he looked really good this past season. I really like, again, what you got from a pass rushing standpoint from a guy in Joseph Adidere that, again, we mentioned earlier, comes over from Texas Tech, and NC State now pairs him with a former teammate in Harvey Dyson. So, and Harvey Dyson expected to play a little bit of stand-up edge, but also linebacker position. So you do feel a little bit of needs there. But again, I agree with you. I think at the very least, you need some guys in there that can compete with them, not just young faces or, guys that are returning that haven't been productive at all for NC State, but also just, again, putting some quality depth there and somebody to compete with them when you get to spring and fall practice, because you're not going to have another window to do that.
Well, you're just an injury away up front at really every position right now for NC State and the majority of college programs right now. It is so hard to have really depth anywhere up front, much less experienced depth. So the new age college football, you're just going to be relying on young guys. If you projected today, Josiah Victor's probably your nose, Chase Bond at one end, and then probably Harvey Dyson, depending on if they are multiple to a certain extent. Could you go bigger on one end? But those would probably be where but then Corey gets to all right, well, what else do we have? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of unknowns. You hear Adrian Farrow's name. The kid who came in, for his name escapes me, last year from junior college, Prim. There's talk that maybe it looks like he's going to bulk up and move inside. We'll see.
I really like Josh Warren too, that you got out of Georgia.
100%. And maybe it's a situation, and maybe it's a situation where you say you're going to have to ask more of a guy like that. You got your fingers crossed he can produce. I am nervous, though, if we're being honest, about the defensive line. Don't have a great feeling there. And then offensive line, again, the people behind the scenes have done so much work and done a great job. It is just an unenviable task right now, trying to put together a roster when your funds are limited, when you're not one of the blue bloods. It is really, really, really hard. And the inflation and the money right now is incredible.
Yeah, last thing here, Vincent asked, he said, and now I'm just going to throw it on the spot here. We'll have more time to talk about this, as NC State actually finalizes everything in the transfer portal. But Vincent asked, he said, what's Michael's current grade on the transfer portal haul, considering the additions and subtractions so far for NC State?
Is it a C plus B? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think right now is the key. Like, if you're able to somewhere add a linebacker or two, a defensive lineman or two, then it would be better. But again, I think it's been tough. I think it's been tough for a lot of teams across the country. Not necessarily to get receivers, running backs. We know those are there in numbers everywhere because that's what every kid wants to play. It's just, again, it's hard. It's really hard. The cost from this last portal to this one, I mean, it was substantially more. And, when you invest, it really, before we go, is similar to the quarterback in the NFL. When you have to pay your quarterback X, top of the line money, it trickles down to every position. And you just don't have the money to add maybe that linebacker you need or the guard. You don't. But none of this matters if the quarterback's not right. It doesn't. I mean, as good as Indiana is, they are really good up front. Carson Beck is more than capable. I know people have their opinions. They had to pay him, but the success, up front, again, is what is helpful. But that does not matter. Neither team is playing for the national championship, obviously, without Fernando Mendoza or Carson Beck. Regardless of what you think of the latter, you got to get it right. And NC State is in as good a position. I think it could be there with the return of C.J. Bailey. Is he a finished product? No, I don't think you want that. I think the next thing for him is you're really going to ask him next year to elevate others around him. And State's going to have that to overcome the shortcomings on its roster.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. And I think, again, that's why the focus continues to be in the trenches, not only on the offensive side of the football, but on the defensive side, trying to figure out what exactly NC State can do, where you can add. We'll have much more talking about, NC State recruiting, the transfer portal. We'll talk plenty about, trying to put together the rest of this roster over the next few days. Michael, I appreciate you for jumping on as always, man.
All right, dude. We'll talk soon.
All right, and I appreciate everybody for jumping in, dropping some questions. Got to go do some more work on Daniel Cruz and pushing the rest of this content out here. But thank you to everybody for listening. We will talk to you again soon.